top story, the informal summit between PM Modi and President Xi Jinping showed the bonhomie between the two world leaders as they discussed trade, terror and heritage. As the main superpowers in the region, the summit highlighted the close relations between the two countries. Both PM Modi and President Xi Jinping spent almost 5 hours of quality time. The personal rapport between the two was clearly on display as they toured the heritage sites.
भगवान शिव को समर्पित हैं और दोनों ही मंदिरों में जो पैनल है उन पर
There have been nearly 5 hours of discussion and quality time that the Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping of China have spent together. Most of this was one-to-one, with the exception of the half-hour cultural program.
PM Modi and President Xi Jinping also spoke for over 2 hours during dinner. Discussions between the two world leaders ranged from trade and terror to national priorities of the two nations.
The discussions that took place over the meal actually stretched over 150 minutes, roughly 2.5 hours, and this was well beyond the planned time for the discussions. Discussions were very open and cordial. This was quality time that the two leaders spent together one-on-one. The rest of the two delegations were in fact in a separate location having dinner. The two leaders had a detailed discussion on their respective national visions, on their governance priorities. The Prime Minister explained that having been recently re-elected to a second term, he had received a renewed mandate for economic development. And President Xi Jinping, of course, while acknowledging that Prime Minister had got a mandate, said that he was looking forward to working very closely with the Prime Minister on all issues during the next 4.5 years. They also spoke about other developmental priorities. In particular, there was some discussion on trade-related issues, on economic issues, on trying to identify areas for investment that the two countries could to encourage, and also on how to enhance the trade volume and the trade value. And in this also obviously included the issue of the trade deficit that exists and the unbalanced trade that exists. Some of the other topics included the challenges that both countries face on account of terrorism.
And for more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal is joining us for more. Siddhant, now what were the key outcomes of the first day of the Modi-Xi meet?
Well, the two big outcomes of the first day of the meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping here in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu were on the two T's, that is trade and terror. On trade, we know India has been concerned about the trade deficit, which is at around $55 billion. And the Indian Prime Minister, when he met during those 5 hours, especially in the dinner, he raised India's concern. We know that since the Wuhan informal summit last year, China has allowed market access to Indian agriculture products such as tobacco leaves and non-basmati rice. That, of course, remained a crucial issue. The Indian Prime Minister said that it should become or enlarge into volumes, and this could help reduce the trade deficit between the two countries. On the issue of terror, that has been a common concern globally. The Indian side and the Chinese side had a similar view on radicalization, how that can impact the fabric of the society of both the countries, and how when it comes to terrorism, both countries are willing to make sure that this scourge is defeated, and this of course remains the top priority of the Indian government and of the Chinese government. By and large, in the 5-hour one-on-one meeting, first at the heritage sites and then at the dinner, both the sides discussed their national priorities and how that is important for them, and how the other country can, in a sense, help. Or there are, of course, parallels when it comes to national priorities of both Beijing and New Delhi.
Right, Siddharth. Also tell us about more on the optics of the first day. Now, both leaders visited heritage sites, and we also saw PM Modi showcasing India's rich culture.
Well, optics were the big story. In a sense, we saw the visuals, which describe the body language of both the leaders, the personal rapport between the two leaders, which has built over last 1 year after the informal summit, and of course the many meetings. Remember, this is the third meeting between both the leaders since the re-election of President Xi, and the 6th meeting since Wuhan summit. In fact, both the leaders are again going to meet in 15 days' time in Bangkok during the East Asia Summit. So that was the big focus as well. We saw the pictures of the Indian Prime Minister explaining the history, the culture of the town, and how there is a connect between this part of the world with China. There are common linkages which the Indian Prime Minister talked about, how during the Pallava dynasty in the 6th and the 8th century there were connect with China, and of course Bodhidharma, the person who was behind spreading of the Buddhism, Zen Buddhism in China, came from this part of India. So these common linkages, historical linkages, were the focus of the conversations, the visuals which we saw on the first day of the second informal summit, and of course we can expect more on the second day of this informal summit.
Right, exactly, Siddharth. So what can we really expect today, Siddharth?
Well, the second day of the second India informal summit, India-China informal summit, will see both the leaders again talking to each other for considerable time, and of course there will be delegation level talks. But today the focus will be on the extension of the talks which happened on Friday. Both the leaders are going to discuss the issue of terrorism, on trade, and of course the national priorities which were discussed at length during the dinner which happened late last night on Friday night. Then of course we do expect press statements as well. It will be in fact open for press during the start of the delegation level, and we can expect both the leaders talking about what they have been discussing in last 24 hours. And this is a new addition to this informal meeting which is taking place, because during the Wuhan informal meet, this was not made public. In a sense, there were no public statements by both the leaders, but this time around there are public statements which are being made, and that can highlight what was the key focus of both the sides, whether it's from the Indian side or whether it's from the Chinese side.